My name is Jamie. I'm a member of the PRCA Health Group, and welcome to this PRCA Health webinar on AI. For those of you who aren't already familiar with the PRCA, or the Public Relations and Communications Association, PRCA is the world's largest professional PR body. PRCA represents more than 35,000 PR professionals in 82 countries worldwide, with offices in major cities all over the world. And the PRCA is a global advocate for excellence in public relations, including, of course, those of you who are working in healthcare PR. We're hosting today's webinar and by the way, I should probably preface that my introduction is partially written by ChatGPT-4, so forgive me if it doesn't sound so much fluid as you would expect. We're hosting today's webinar to dive into an innovative and exciting topic that is really reshaping our lives and society, i.e. the world of artificial intelligence, and more specifically, how AI is affecting and could influence and affect the healthcare sector. This hopefully thought-provoking session we aim to broaden our understanding of AI's relevance and influence in the health and life sciences sector, but also to trigger a discussion, that we hope to continue in the rest of the year and beyond, as some of the things we may discuss today may go unanswered, may be unknown, or may be too difficult to address today. So throughout the session, we encourage you to send in your questions through the Q&A function, and we will address those at the dedicated Q&A session towards the end. Bit of practical things to say. We are recording the session, and it will be available to view on demand for PRCA members after the event. This event is worth 15 CPD points, and as a bonus, our colleague Rose from the PRCA Health Group has kindly offered to draft a report summarizing the event, which will be made available shortly after the webinar. So, as I mentioned before, we hope this event and the discussions today will act as a springboard, hopefully for our PRCA Health Conference later this year, our flagship event. The PRCA Health Conference will probably be in September, October, but we'll share more details in the coming weeks, and we hope to see you there to continue the discussion. So thanks once again. I see more people are coming in the door. Thanks once again for joining us, and we hope for an engaging and enlightening session. Now let me introduce our speakers. We have Tom, who's MD of Residence, and he also happens to be the co-chair of a brand new PRCA group, the AI group. So I'm sure Tom will shamelessly promote the AI group later on during his intervention, and you're very much welcome to do so. We have Clee, who's the Principal Scientific Advisor for AI at NICE. Farhan, also from NICE, who is Associate Director for the Office of Digital Health and the Topic of Intelligence. And we have Ross, who is the Commercial Director at DrDoctor. Tom actually has kindly agreed to kick us off today with a really short introduction to the topic. And so Tom, would you be able to spend maybe 10 minutes setting the scene for us and providing a short overview of AI's emerging uses in the life sciences industry? And because most of us on the call here today are PR practitioners or in related functions, I have two questions for you that maybe you could incorporate now or come back to in the Q&A session. And the first one is, why should we incorporate AI into our daily practice? And the second part, why now? Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. And it's certainly an interesting time when it comes to AI. I mean, the last 6 months have been nothing short of a kind of watershed moment in this industry. And I'm sure a lot of people have joined today because of this news attention that it's currently receiving. But what we actually see in today's news is actually a culmination of a journey that's gone on for decades. And it's definitely not the first time that AI has kind of been front page news. It's something that's been around for a while. So I'd like to give a little bit of a flavor of kind of how we've got to where we are today, and maybe talk a little bit about the future, and also obviously what do we need to know as PR practitioners. How should we advise our clients? What should we be doing? That sort of thing. So as Jamie said, yes, my name is Tom Fry. So I head up data and innovation at Resonance, as well as being the co-MD and also the co-chair of the PRCA AI and ML group. So my journey into AI it started quite about probably over 20 years ago. I did my university degree was computer science at Cambridge. And I've been working in this sector professionally ever since. And my kind of first recollection of AI in the news, if we're kind of combining, media and AI, was back in 1997. So back then, for anyone that might remember, IBM created this supercomputer. It's called Deep Blue, and it beat the reigning world chess champion. And it ignited a huge debate in the media. It was, it's very similar to what we see today. It was kind of a debate about machines taking over, and should we trust them, and are they too intelligent, and this sort of thing. But what happened is actually something that's happened a few times in AI, which is it went quiet for a while. It's and it's sometimes described as like the AI winter and AI summers, which kind of coincides with the amount of research and development and kind of noise that's happening. But since between kind of 97 and a few years ago, actually a lot was happening behind the scenes, and a lot of the advances and the foundations of the technology we see today was laid in those kind of early 2000s and 2010s. It's especially with companies like Google kind of doing a lot of research as well as academia. And it was actually Google DeepMind, so it's part of Google, the British part of Google, that they kind of brought it back into mainstream media and kind of lay the foundations where we are today in some respects. So what I'm referring to is a system called AlphaGo, and it was another game Go. But much more advanced, to the 100 times more advanced than and complicated than chess. And the AlphaGo engine beat Lee Sedol, who was the current world champion. It was something that no one thought would be possible, but they made it happen. And there was this deep neural engine that they created that did something new. It kind of brought this idea of strategic thinking to AI. Now that technology didn't end, and it does actually become relevant to healthcare, because the technology morphed into something called AlphaFold, sorry. And AlphaFold is this AI system, still very much kind of being researched and developed at the moment. But it's an AI system that was developed to predict the protein's 3D structure from its amino acid sequences. And basically, there's something like 200 million proteins, called potential proteins, out there, and every single one has a different structure. And this was a new algorithm to figure out how it looks, and that had huge implications for how you could use proteins for developing new therapies. And the database of all these predicted 3D structures has been described as one of the most important data sets since the mapping of the human genome. So it really was quite a groundbreaking discovery. If you bring it kind of forwards a little bit, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw how kind of AI accelerated the creation of vaccines. It didn't create the vaccines themselves, but in terms of the actually bringing them to the general public and kind of understanding their impact. It was used extensively by Pfizer and Moderna. There's a lot of kind of case studies, if you look on their website, to understand how it is used. So really kind of the groundbreaking aspect of it was kind of laid a few years ago, but all of this groundbreaking research kind of pales into comparison when we think about the impact of ChatGPT, and that's kind of probably why, as I said, a lot of you on this webinar, because it really is kind of somehow the tip of everyone's tongue, and I suppose, it's kind of an incredible language creation tool. It can famously write instructions for the removal of a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR in the style of biblical verse. I mean, I don't think anything like that has ever existed before. And it really was game-changing. McKinsey actually issued a report just last week saying that it was going to add trillions to the global economy. And I think the reason that they think it's going to add so much value is that just as kind of every company can be thought of as a technology company today, I think it won't be long until every company can be thought of as an AI technology. It really will kind of be part of our everyday kind of productivity tools, and we're already kind of seeing that today. As Jamie said, he used ChatGPT to help him write the speech. I think he's not the only one, although I didn't, to be fair. So healthcare is definitely no disruption to this this kind of evolution and change that's going on. So when we think of AI in healthcare, what are we thinking of? So, well, really, I mean, across the full gamut of healthcare and life sciences too. So from diagnosis through to drug discovery and therapy development, AI is kind of coming across all of those different facets. So to give a few examples, so we're already seeing computer vision combined with deep learning algorithms being used to analyze and read X-rays, CT scans, MRIs with higher accuracy than radiologists in some cases. And the speed is the what's magnificent about it. It's helping discover new treatments. So you've got reinforcement learning, where algorithms learn by trial and error, and they're helping to accelerate and improve drug discovery. And just last month, Nature magazine described this new AI tool that's going to help improve mRNA vaccines. They're helping them to become more potent and stable by optimizing the underlying gene sequences of the vaccines. And of course, there's generative AI. And, we've heard a lot about it. And, as PR practitioners, we think about it and see it very much from the language generation point of view, how it can write, anything from a blog post to, the first stab at a press release. But from a healthcare point of view, what's really interesting about generative AI is how it's got a multimodal capability. That means that it works across different types of data. So it's not just limited to text. It can read speech. It can analyze images, create the images. It can analyze video. So when we kind of apply that to healthcare, we can see that it will be used to interpret medical images. So kind of evolution of the computer vision that we've already seen. It will bring in generative AI. It can understand electronic health records. It can look at laboratory results, and it can even look at, well, ultimately, we believe it can look at patients' individual genomics. So, every patient can have a kind of personalized health treatment plan thanks to generative AI. And the reason is because it can work across all these different modes of data. So that's an interesting area, and we're really just on the cusp of it. We just started. I mean, ChatGPT, GPT-3 came a couple of years before that, but it's very early. The transformer model that Google released that formed the basis of this came out in 2017. So it's really kind of at the early stage of it all. Now, obviously, it creates questions. The questions that's really kind of are focused around how to use this technology in safe and ethical ways. That's kind of the starting point. It kind of raises a lot of question marks there. We kind of wonder how regulators should approach this new technology. What are the reputational implications of using this technology? And how is patient privacy and their data protected? When maybe the model itself is kind of a black box. So there's a lot of questions. And I would argue, as PR practitioners, these are the conversations we've got to really be paying attention to, because we are the kind of gatekeepers to our clients' reputation. So we need to know the kind of answers. And so there's a lot for us to kind of debate and chew over. But also it's a super exciting time for the industry, for AI, for technology, you know, for healthcare, its implications. So it's definitely time for a frank and open debate. So that's kind of my little intro and flavor of what's going on right now. I'm just going to do a very, very quick little plug. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about AI and its implications for the PR community and PR practitioners, then do consider joining the PRCA AI and ML group, which I'm the co-chair of. We're going to have more discussions and probably more focus just on implications for PR, and we're trying to get some of the vendors that are at the cutting edge of this technology to come and speak to us. So consider joining the group and hearing more from that. And so that's it from me for now until the Q&A. But I'm going to hand back to Jamie, and let's kick off the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for sharing your insights. And I hear a lot of similarities to the argument about the impact of digitalization generally in healthcare. You know, it's been around for a while, telehealth, digital health, e-health, and you know, sometimes we're reliant on something hitting the news for us to have a more broader discussion. But really great insights. So thank you for sharing, and looking forward to hearing some more later on. I'd like to maybe ask Ross to introduce himself and tell us a bit about DrDoctor, and maybe kick us off with a couple of questions related to use in healthcare. So how have you seen AI being incorporated in healthcare? How are you incorporating this into the services you provide? And perhaps to share a little bit about, is this helping improve health service delivery or health system efficiency, or could it? How the end users, patients, healthcare professionals, carers, etc., how are they reacting to the rollout of AI in health? And perhaps maybe we can come on to a little of barriers and facilitators and some tips for some of the listeners to work with their clients on. So Ross, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jamie, and thanks, Tom. I really enjoyed that introduction, and my internet seems to be doing something a bit silly at the moment. So if it gets a bit Dalek-y, someone wave and I'll cut the camera. But really nice to be here. And I suppose my background is foremost as a clinician. I started as a physio, worked my way up through the hospitals, then decided I wanted to go into management. So then I managed in every different type of healthcare you can imagine. And I was one of those people who was on gold command calls with generals when COVID hit in primary care, when we had a 5-year digitization plan that we were able to enact in, I think, about 2 weeks. So I've seen the struggles of digitizing healthcare, and I've actually seen, when you get people behind it, how quickly things can happen as well. And in my current job, I've moved to DrDoctor, who's a health tech company whose prime goal is to solve little problems that they found around the kind of hospital environment. And one of the big areas for us is DNAs, people that don't attend appointments, worth about £1 billion a year to the total healthcare system. So it's a huge problem to fix. And we were already fixing it. But when I joined in January, nobody was talking about the fact that we had a DNA AI predictor. So we could look at a list of patients and predict which ones were the ones that were not going to turn up. And this blew my mind. There is no sector of healthcare I've ever worked in where that isn't the most exciting thing I've ever heard, which probably tells you how boring my 20-year career has been. But I got very, very excited. And that's what kind of got me into the rounds of AI. And I think we're in a really interesting place. So I think we're going through a bit of a product life cycle at the moment where there's an awful lot of hype and excitement. But in terms of frontline changes that are happening broadly in healthcare provision and in patient experience, I think we're still quite a long way off seeing that. I kind of see it as research and data is where we're seeing fantastic impact and traction right now. I can then see it going into kind of surfacing information quicker, sort of supporting people in their more traditional roles. And then the bit that we're really focused on is removing low value interaction. So it's getting rid of kind of admin tasks that can be fully automated, but then also things like clinical pathways. There are appointments that happen routinely every 3 or 6 months for people, which could actually all just be removed if we have the right combination of intelligent tech supporting them. So it's about releasing time to care properly rather than replacing kind of clinical stuff. And that's been one of the really interesting things about our AI product, is that we're not saving a huge amount of money for people in terms of admin time the way that we're actually having an impact is because we know 50% of people are definitely going to turn up. They don't need lots of expensive reminders to attend, so we can cut that cost out of the system. Then we've got the next 30% who a second reminder massively increases their likelihood of turning up. But then we've got that final 20%, and they're the people that are likely to have barriers to healthcare in the first place. So all our communications might have been in the wrong language. They might have caring requirements. They might have transport issues, all things that can be solved if we know about them. And what we found is we can get rid of low value interactions to free up time to have those more meaningful ones and break down some of those health inequalities and barriers to healthcare. So that's been like a really fascinating thing. And if you indulge me, I'll give you my favorite example, which is when I used to manage on the front line, I had Sue on the reception desk, and Sue used to know everything about all the people in the local area. And our AI, one of the first things it spat out was that if you give people with a free bus pass an appointment at rush hour when they have to pay for their ticket, the likelihood of them not turning up is massively increased. Now, Sue would never have booked someone who's a pensioner with a bus pass at 8 a.m. in the morning. She'd have picked someone who was a working aged individual who's far more likely to really want those appointments. But that kind of information is being lost as we don't have 30-year professionals doing these kind of roles anymore. And yet the AI is not only able to identify and come to similar conclusions, but it can be infinitely scalable across the whole system. So that's the sort of really exciting thing for me. But I think we're going through a bit of a product life cycle where there's lots of hype and excitement. But when it comes to the frontline aspect, I'm seeing a lot of companies that are either trying to solve everything in one go and requiring huge amounts of additional funding and investment before they can get anywhere near that. Or I'm seeing some really impressive clinical implementation, but it's very, very neat. And maybe it's my commercial director hat on, but it's going to be very hard to fund those projects to a scale or ever get to a point where, there's a return on that investment without something changing. So I feel like we kind of got both extremes. And it was a bit of a surprise to me that a company that wasn't trying to solve an AI thing had actually produced something that does it really well, because it was trying to fix a problem rather than trying to be an AI company, which I thought was quite interesting.
Thanks so much, Ross. We've actually had a question come in related to how do we, what's your take on integrating training for healthcare professionals? So I imagine in your role, you or your organization have quite a lot of interactions with, end users, patients, healthcare professionals. So is there a gap? Is there something that needs to be done? Have you tackled this issue yet of training end users?
So I think it's coming. It's definitely coming. For instance, at Intelligent Health recently, at the conference, I saw someone there whose job title was actually AI transformation lead at the Royal Marsden. Now they're a big cancer institute, they're a lot of big innovators. It doesn't surprise me they've got a role like that, but the mere fact something like that exists shows the commitment of kind of frontline staffing. I think the day-to-day staff, particularly the clinical staff, I don't see it happening, but the universities we're speaking to a lot. And I'm starting to see increasingly people who've maybe graduated as a doctor, gone in to become a product lead, and now they're actually doing training skills sessions specifically around digitizing healthcare. But I had a conversation at ComFed last week where we were specifically talking about how do we get people understanding the impact that AI and digitization is going to have on these undergrads' future careers. And I think we'll probably be spending much more of our time at that kind of undergrad level with lots of doctors and clinicians in future.
Thanks, Ross. So there's some work there for fellow PR professionals in spreading the word about PR, about AI itself and about the needs for training and addressing those. So I'd like to maybe bring in Clee and Farhan to come in with the evaluator's perspective here. So, first of all, please do shortly introduce yourselves and maybe tell us a little bit about your roles, and kick us off with a simple question: how is NICE, how are evaluators assessing AI? So I'll hand it over to you, and we'll come back for some more specific questions later on.
Can I take the evaluation one, Farhan, and then I'll come in on the other side of things.
Sounds good. Thanks, Clee. So I'm Farhan. I'm the Associate Director of the Office for Digital Health and MedTech Topic Intelligence at NICE. I'm a clinically trained pharmacist, and I've worked in lots of different clinical specialties prior to going into commissioning across the southeast of England, which where I focused on implementation of drugs, devices in acute providers, medical charities, prison services. And it was in that role where I also became the appointed clinical safety officer for the organisation, the commissioning organisation, which was a healthcare IT solutions developer. And this is where I first learned about the relative vacuum that exists in the assessment of digital health tech, which made deploying them very tricky. And I'm an innovation champion. I bring this sort of experience to NICE and joined in December 21. And I've been supporting NICE's activity in digital health, and specifically around developing the new early value assessment program, which you may have read about. Now, in terms of how AI is being evaluated in healthcare, the short answer, I think, is inconsistently. This doesn't reflect the reality that AI is an umbrella term for lots of different types of technologies, which sit in different parts of the health system, as has been described already. So you find it at the back end, in the middle, all the way at the front, which is where patients and practitioners are. And I think a point to note here is that NICE is an evaluator. We often go out and speak to people that refer to NICE as a regulator, and there is a slight difference, well, a significant difference there. In the simplest terms, regulators focus on safety, efficacy, quality of a health technology, whereas NICE will look beyond that point at the clinical and cost effectiveness of the technology. And you need to bear that in mind in understanding where we are with AI technology at the moment. So at this point in time, NICE's methods and processes for health technology assessment, which are available on the website, they're applied to all health technologies that come our way. And we've already looked at some AI-based tech. The gist of the evaluation there was that further evidence was needed, unsurprisingly, to address the uncertainties that were identified. And this is the key here. There are lots of uncertainties in this area, some of which are more specific to AI-based technologies. And by uncertainties, I mean, these are typical of health technology appraisal, in like the usual domains of clinical uncertainty, from a lack of high quality, minimally biased evidence on the short and long-term clinical effectiveness of a technology, for example, economic uncertainty from a lack of accurate costing data for health technology, the impact it might have on the financial aspects of the health system, and then by extension, long-term cost effectiveness, which relies on good data on clinical effectiveness as well. Now, there are some parameters which are being discussed, and some of these have already been mentioned, which NICE doesn't directly consider in its evaluation methodology, but these are important sources of uncertainty, such as ethics. You know, where there are trade-offs between risks and benefits of the technology in terms of equity of outcomes for different populations and the impact on disadvantaged groups, they need to be considered. There's quite a lot of evidence now being published on differences in outcomes when you remove variables from training models. And then social uncertainty, which looks at the societal risks and benefits from a health technology in terms of non-health related outcomes. And this could be generated or exacerbated by widespread adoption of a product. Regulatory is another area where there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'll let Cliodhna speak to that point as the lead for the AI and digital regulation service. But the final point from me is that NICE is fully aware of the need to develop new methods for evaluating AI-based tech. We had a go at it when we've published the evidence standards framework for digital health technologies, which covers AI and data-driven technologies. And this is actually now being picked up by interested parties globally. And we're actively involved in these discussions to try to develop another way of looking at AI tech, but it's an evolving field which we expect to see some progress in over the coming months, possibly years. So that's, in terms of evaluation, there's still work to do there. And I think it's just a reflection of how early or how young the discipline is at the moment.
Thanks, Farhan. So based on what you just said, you can come back to the event later on this year and speak again, or another colleague can come back and speak again to plug those gaps. Clee?
Yeah, I think it's important to reflect that it is a very young field. I mean, just to think that the deep learning revolution kicked off in 2010, and that now we're seeing the second generation as a result of transformers being that methodology developed in 2017. a lot to be learned still. And I think it's across the board. I don't think that anybody who's working in any of the big tech companies who've had these big breakthroughs would say, we got it down in terms of understanding how these systems work. Like nobody's saying that. In fact, everyone's saying the opposite. We need more fundamental science to following the engineering as opposed to the other way around. I think that's the first thing to say. I think it's also probably just worth mentioning that NICE is more than just an evaluator. It's also an enabler and has very specific ways in which we go about trying to help both companies and NHS, social care, independent health sector, develop and adopt the best AI. And I'm from that side of NICE. So potted history, or what my current job is, I lead a program which is all about making it easier and more navigable for any developer or adopter of AI to understand what the regulatory requirements are, why they matter, how to comply with them, when to take appropriate action. And it kind of speaks a little bit to Elizabeth's question earlier around AI being integrated into training for healthcare professionals. Well, the first step is always awareness around, so what is this thing, and also why do we have certain rules in place around it? What do those rules reflect? Like, what are the risks that they're trying to mitigate? And this is a collaboration with MHRA, Care Quality Commission, Health Research Authority, significantly more relevant regulators or governing bodies like the Information Commissioner's Office, Equalities and Human Rights Commission, which really reflects that whole big swathe of important considerations, or indeed values, that we want to see as a society integrated into technologies that we use and that affect people when they're most vulnerable. So I've just popped that in the chat. Do have a look at it, and also tell us if you found it useful for you as a developer or an advisor to a company or to an adopter. And then the other bits of work that I do is also advising companies, like really sitting down with them and working through the detail of their evidence generation strategies. So this is in the nice scientific advice side of things, which is very much the enabling function. So think of it as it comes way before, or we aim to come way before you're going to go speak with Farhan about the early value assessment and about being evaluated. We're there to help you think in very granular detail about how the technology can add value. And this actually brings us on to like one very important tension point, which I think is kind of reflected in what you were saying earlier, Tom, about, you know, you're able to use these technologies now for things we never could have thought of previously. But also there's a difference in that many advanced AI technologies, they're more than one shot, right? You can try them a couple of times out to get it right. Healthcare is a high precision sector, both in terms of the risk, but also in terms of, let's be honest, it's always going to be run to a tight budget because of wanting to spread the means as far and wide as possible. So there is that kind of different way of thinking about the impact of AI within health. It's not as much just throw it in and see if it works. It has to still be very focused on the specific solution and with in-depth understanding of the problem, of the care pathway, of how exactly it would improve cancer diagnostics, as opposed to just it has a high accuracy. It has to be, take that in the round. And I think also another thing which we're seeing as a bit of a tension point, but really I think it's a useful inflection point. We often talk about AI as, oh, it's accurate, you know, it's more accurate than humans, or it's just as accurate or makes just as many errors as humans. Why not just implement it? I think that the thing which is really important to reflect on is that we have invented governance systems, right? Governance systems for demonstrating it's clinically and cost effective from a NICE perspective, governance systems around safety, which are tailored to the human user. But AI is a different type of thinker. It's a different type of user. And the way that AI gets things wrong is not necessarily the same way that humans get things wrong. And, you know, there's so many different examples of this. So examples of, for example, AI misdiagnosing a patient because it was attuning to where the scan was taken as opposed to the actual characteristics of the scan itself, cancer scan itself, because that in that location there's a higher rate of cancer. So basically, it can sometimes give you an answer that might be correct, but might not be for the right reason. So how do we erect effective governance edifices to detect, to monitor, and also to iteratively improve? Because we still all want to get the benefit from this, but it just is going to take a lot more work to really build a different type of cathedral around it. So those are some of the kind of interesting challenges that it's posing, you know, not just within the technology itself, but everything that we wrap around it. And which is part of the reason why we needed to take a multi-regulator approach, a multi-agency approach. And it's, you know, we're really happy to see that central government has reflected that as well in advising we need more multi-regulator approaches for AI, for emerging technology across the board.
Thank you so much, Clea, for sharing your insights, and a clear message there that, you know, a multi-disciplinary or multi-agency approach is needed, and that, you know, having that discussion for the enablement, or whatever the word is to describe that, probably know the word better than I do, to have that discussion first to get the iterations right. So I think some really helpful insights there. Could I ask you both another question, and that's how are we in England or the UK comparing to our international peers with respect to this? Are we ahead? Are we behind? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. It's the first answer. I guess it depends on what you're looking at. So if you look at, for example, number of technologies that have been approved and are on the market, I think the US was ahead, but the US also had, unfortunately, an instance of significant recalls by multiple different approved AI technologies very rapidly. So, and I think that speaks to some of the errors that we can make in thinking that actually knowing how an AI works is quite a simple, straightforward thing. You know, we've approved an AI for, say, this type of cancer, surely they all could work. Actually, no, because each of them will be built with a different secret sauce. So you therefore need to actually have that work done. On the other hand, when it comes to things like the early value assessment program that Farhan was talking about, I think a lot would say that we're further ahead in actually seeing we need to take steps earlier to actually investigate, are these technologies working better at an earlier stage, that then gives the, you know, small companies a lot of the time a bit more help to get further ahead, because otherwise it can be a very big gulf between getting that initial regulatory approval and then getting that summative evidence or kind of evidence statement as to you work well or you don't work as well. I think one of the things that the UK, which I do hear resoundingly, is more competitive on is the number of offers for developing and bringing AI to market, provided by Her Majesty's government and the NHS. You know, the AI award, for example, the Innovation Service, the Digital AI and Digital Regulation Service, multiple others. I think DrDoctor have been a beneficiary of almost all of those at one point or other. And I think also just the kind of clinical acumen as well, the intelligence and expertise across the country. So those are one area where it's considered to be further ahead. So those are some of the different domains and dimensions in my commentary on them.
Thank you, Clea and Farhan. Tom, as the PR practitioner on the panel, can I ask you, from what you've experienced so far and from what you've heard in the session already, should we be trying to take on more clients who are working on AI, or for those who wish to take on more clients who are working on AI, or who wish to talk publicly about, you know, their activities in AI, what challenges can you foresee, or what challenges have you overcome in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you know, I think when bringing on new clients, the fundamental questions that we have to ask ourselves when we're considering taking on a client doesn't really change, whether it's AI or some other kind of technology or some other type of client. You know, still need to do our due diligence and And so that doesn't change, but as Clee said, you know, within this technology there is still a lot to be learned, and you know, even big tech's trying to figure it out, and we're still quite early in the cycle of the technology. So really what we need to do is be comfortable with it and kind of understand it to the extent that we think that it's a good technology that's we can get behind. It also is worth kind of considering that AI as a kind of technology, I mean, you know, there's obviously very many different types and of AI, and you know, it's a very broad term for lots of different types of technology. But you know, fundamentally, it can be kind of an open technology or a closed or a kind of black box technology. And so we've got to be a bit wary if we're kind of representing black box technologies, because you know, you don't necessarily know what's going on under the hood. But if it's kind of open AI, we can be a bit more comfortable with it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, we just need to ask ourselves the questions. We need to be comfortable that their technology is ethical and secure, just as we would be with any other clients. And then, you know, we just got to, as PR practitioners, we got to just go in with our eyes wide open and understand what else is going on in the world. What, you know, how does it fit in terms of all the other technology and developments that are going on? And, you know, we need to be, you know, advising our clients to make sure that they stay ahead of the changing technology landscape.
Thank you, Tom. So related to that, being comfortable with the technology or being comfortable with the concepts, have you brought in any special training or for your staff, for your teams, or do they come to you? Do you recruit them already skilled in this area? And if you were to want people to keep up to date, you know, how are you going about that, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, at Resonance, we obviously, you know, we're specifically in the technology industry, so you know, we kind of hold quite regular training sessions, make sure everyone's kind of understanding all the different technology, all the different aspects of PR in general. It's not just about tech; it's about, you know, best practice in lots of different areas. So AI is not really kind of any different. It's about finding the best tools and methods for the job. So you know, so you could kind of look at, and also, you know, you know, there's a danger we kind of get a bit focused into generative AI, because that's the kind of, you know, the tool of the moment, and it's you know, that's quite early. It's you know, obviously has a lot of promise as a digital assistant to help you to write. There's lots of different types of AI tools that we've been using for years, and you know, we kind of share those tools and make sure everyone's using it. Like a good example would be Grammarly, you know, spotting typos in content. We probably all use it. And it's AI based, and it's really useful. So I just see it as a useful tool, and we need to just make sure that everyone's kind of up to speed of all the different tools that can help them to do their job, and kind of, you know, what's going on in the media landscape, as we would any other technology.
Thanks, Tom. And I think that reinforces the point earlier about getting comfortable with this. We hear a lot in the media. You know, I once wrote a position paper on artificial intelligence a long time ago, and I started with, well, a calculator did, electronic calculator, and you know, was that AI when it first came out? You know, there's a lot of things we take for granted right now that we use on a daily basis. So I think this message about getting comfortable with it, I think this is something we need to take forward into future discussions later this year. Because there's a lot of hoo-ha about losing jobs or losing parts of jobs, you know. So I think we've moved beyond that now. I think it's time to, if I check my clock, yeah, it's time to open up the floor for questions or comments from the floor. We already have one question here related. Actually, Tom, it's for you. Is how do we join the PRCA AI group? So perhaps if you want to take another moment to talk about who we need to contact, how can we get involved in this AI group?
Yeah, sure. Well, all the PRCA groups are listed on the website, and they all have instructions how to join, who you should get in touch if you want to join. It's also worth kind of keeping an eye on the group webpage, because upcoming events that you might want to join will be listed. They'll also obviously be promoted more widely. But yeah, Kiri Abrahams is probably the person you want to get in touch if you want to be added to the mailing list.
Thank you, Tom. So I've got some general questions now for all of the panelists who could jump in as they wish or not, depending on the question and their preferences. I wonder, I think the word vigilance and safety and reporting of of issues, I think that was mentioned briefly. I can't remember who, maybe it was Farhan. But this is a question for everybody. How is the vigilance or the reporting of adverse events, or let's say the unintended consequences of some of this technology we're talking about, how is this being addressed? Is it any different from what we do normally? Or how should it or could it be? Is there something different we could do with this? So opening the floor to anybody who may wish to take that.
I mean, just one comment on that one is that what we're seeing is people tending to, or at this point in time, the products coming forward are ones that tend to surface information rather than become medical devices in their own right. So people are being very careful to tread that line, that if you're just informing and you're speeding up processes, that's quite a safe space to play. But the moment you do something as simple as review a form that sends someone down one path instead of another, you've done a clinical triage then, and suddenly you're a medical device. So that's a real biggie. That's a line that I certainly be quite nervous to cross. And I think, there's a lot of excitement just this week about Huma getting a class 2, what's the word they use, clearance by the FDA. It's still really early on in any tech's ability to kind of take over from real clinical interventions.
Thanks, Ross. Clea, I see your microphone is off.
Yeah. So at almost every single panel discussion I do, there's 2 examples which come up time and time again. And one of them is the homegrown post office scandal of the accounting system, which led to several deputy post masters and mistresses being accused of fraud. It's still ongoing, still hasn't been resolved. And also the Dutch child benefits scandal, where again, families, in particular ones who were from minoritized groups, such as single mothers or ethnic minorities, were also particularly targeted. And they come up time and time again because they're really good examples of how you can have a problem that is scaled very, very rapidly by merit of it being a digital technology, whereby to an extent that it happens or tends to happen a lot more with a non-digital technology. And as a result, it's implemented, it is being used in many different parts, and there may not be a central overview at the time as to how all these different parts are going wrong, or it's going wrong in those different parts. And that can also happen with something as innocuous sounding as clinical triage, as Ross was just saying. I think it's something that, when you sit down with a company and you walk them through it, you can often then see the light bulb moment of, wait a minute, this is actually something that is much higher risk than I realized. Because, for example, the thing which a human will pick up that the AI may not have been trained to do is the type of subtle cues detection, and also just the scale, as mentioned previously, the scale leading to things happening at a greater harm at a greater level. But a lot is being done to tackle this. And in fairness to our colleagues at the MHRA, they've put out some really useful guidance about vigilance and reporting, which of course I put like a nerd in the chat. And I think it's also just important. It kind of comes back to the question earlier about training clinicians and about, well, actually training healthcare professionals was the point. We have a lot of pretty decent systems already in place to leverage to prevent harm. Some of them are the yellow card system, just ringing up and saying, I think something went wrong here. I think something could have gone wrong here. But it's important for clinicians to understand that, but not just clinicians, because a lot of the people who are interacting with AI are administrators. And they're just as important from an educational perspective as clinicians as well. I think one of the things which I'm excited to see in the coming 10 years is like how we basically underpin our education as a society, that we're actually better able to use AI. And this isn't going to be just things like prompt engineering so that you're able to get better, quicker text when you're writing your speech at, a few moments notice. But actually we need some pretty decent Bayesian probabilistic reasoning across the board for anyone who's interacting with AI. And that's going to be everybody very, very soon, including administrators who are saying, oh, there's an alert coming up here. What might that be about? Should I be actually saying, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think it's got it wrong. So I think there is, yeah, these little systems, which are a simple system on a specific topic, do always open up a whole world of other complexity on top of them, Jamie, I'm afraid.
No, thanks for sharing your perspective, Cliodhna. It got me thinking about Ross. I think your colleague's name was Sue. Was that right? Your colleague who was sort of hunting for the patients who are going to be no-shows, or trying to maximize the appointment show-ups. So, and I've seen a question come in through the Q&A. The original question is, will AI replace healthcare professionals? But I'd like to sort of maybe tweak that question or extend a little bit based also what Clea just said, is because we are working with AI across disciplines. So although Sue may have retired now, and there's something else AI focused that's helping to achieve similar results or better results maybe than Sue. Also, Ross, being so close to the healthcare professionals in your sort of organizational daily work, are you hearing pushback from healthcare professionals or others who may be concerned about, AI taking their job, dare I say it? Do you hear this kind of rhetoric from practitioners on the ground? Is this something that we need to address?
I think there's always been a massive lag between what everyone's talking about and what the research is saying and what they're excited about and what actually happens on the front line. So it's very easy with government changes, white paper changes, new initiatives coming in, to just keep working the way you're working and realize that it may never affect you in your time there, which I know is a very jaded way of looking at it. But so I'm not really hearing people overly worried about losing their jobs. And I think that's because the tech they are seeing does such simple things. And whenever we bring a piece of tech to market, we always think about, is this genuine cash releasing savings that this product brings, or is it giving an opportunity to work differently and to actually enhance the care aspect of healthcare? And certainly the conversations I have are very much the latter. It's very hard to bring something that is a hard stop on cost, because effectively, if you look at Winter Access Fund, which is always massive at the end of the year, unless you produce enough decrease in need to close an entire ward in the hospital, which means getting rid of all the staff for that ward, all the bills associated with it, all the equipment, the consumables, unless you can close an entire ward, you don't actually release any cash from the system. So the chances of people's jobs going are really, really minute. The other thing I would say about the clinical side of it, so I think, Tom, you had an example at the beginning about how clever AI is in detecting things off of imaging, which is really, really cool. But, if I put my clinician hat on, an image is just a moment in time. It's a snapshot of somebody. And actually, when you do a clinical assessment, that's a very, very small part of your decision making. There's a whole part of that in human interaction, the subjective assessment first, that leads you to your hands-on objective assessment that leads to that imaging. And that is, by that point, you've already decided 90% what's wrong. So although it's really cool that we have these things doing that, it doesn't replace any of the healthcare professionals in that pathway. It just allows it to potentially be more efficient.
Thank you, Ross. So we're coming to the end of the session now, and I had sort of one sort of closing question for each of the panelists. So in the last 3-4 minutes, I would like to ask each of you to give a short comment and to say, what are some top tips that you want to leave our audience with when it comes to consideration of any of the topics we've discussed today, and feel free to narrow down to be specific about things that are close to your area of work or things we've discussed today. So top tips to leave the audience with, bearing in mind they're all PR practitioners, based on the discussions we've had today. Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Thanks, Farhan.
The main message from me would be understand that AI exists in so many different disciplines, and just remember that you're trying to move it into healthcare, which operates in a very specific way. Lots of risk-averse clinicians, practitioners, lots of legislation as well, which can't be bypassed. Having a really good understanding of evidence requirements, regulations, and the advice that is out there in the system will make your life easier, hopefully. So do seek it out, invest some time in understanding it, reach out to the people that are already working in this sphere to see if there is a way to address some of the issues you might be coming across.
Thank you, Farhan. Tom, I see your microphone is off. Is that a sign?
Yeah, sure. I'll go next. Well, I just wanted to kind of talk from the technical point of view. You know, that as I said at the start of my keynote, it's kind of, it really is this last 6 months is a watershed moment. The acceleration and the investment that's happening in AI is astonishing, and it is going to change all our lives, in the next few years. But I guess the top tips is really just to, keep reading about it, and keep, for anyone attending or watching this webinar, keep your finger on the pulse of where it's going, because it's a truly exciting time, and we do need to keep kind of ahead of the wave of change. So keep your ears to the ground and enjoy the ride, I guess.
Thank you, Tom.
I would say remember the human in all of this. The vast majority of healthcare professionals still think about human-to-human interaction. There might be the last year or two people are getting into healthcare thinking it's a really cool digitized place. So maybe that's evolving, but the number of times I've tried to sell something that can benefit thousands, millions of people across a region, but someone will give me one edge case as to why that doesn't work. So, think about the human aspects, think about the vignettes. That's what really gets traction with healthcare people. And if I use our DNA products as an example, a lot of the literature out there about people not attending appointments is very blame focused on the patient, rather than the way I described it to you today was about how actually, if we get rid of the low value interventions, we can proactively do things about health inequalities and people's access to care. And that's a prime example of it. We need to remember the vignettes and the humans in this.
Thank you, Ross. Clea?
So I think that the companies and clinicians who I work with, and who I guess some of the qualities I notice in them, or I think they're doing a particularly good job, is they're pretty relentlessly user-focused, whether it's the companies user-focused from the clinician's perspective, or clinicians user-focused from the patient's perspective, and pretty curious, and relentlessly curious, you would say as well, maybe anxiously curious, because not willing to take assumptions about how things are going to go. And I think that that's kind of how we all have to be when we're living in a world of emerging technology, when you're living in a world of breakthroughs on a daily basis, so that the talk you're giving is out of date by tomorrow. But equally, some of those breakthroughs may be not exactly as they appear because of assumptions being made about what is the meaning of it in reality. And I think that that's unfortunately it makes a lot of homework for all of us. But I think that those are the qualities that we all need moving forward, whether you're a PR professional or a clinician or a company.
Thank you so much, Clea. And that's all we have time for. So I'd like to say thank you so much to the panelists. Thanks to the PRCA and the team for helping to put together the webinar. And thanks to all of the audience for joining us today. We will send the report out after the event, and we hope to see you at our flagship health event later on in the year, and join the PRCA AI group. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.